The second part of the senators' question and answer session begins this afternoon, but the impeachment trial could end tomorrow. Senators asked House managers and the president's lawyers nearly 100 questions yesterday, ending after 11 p.m. Eastern. So Nancy Cordes is on Capitol Hill now. After this wraps up, the key question and the key vote is going to be on witnesses and new evidence. Nancy, for the past few days, we've all been trying to guess which way this vote could go. Do we have any more insight?
Well, Anne-Marie, I can tell you that the Republican senators I've been speaking to seem to be increasingly confident that they are going to be able to head off witness testimony in this trial by the narrowest of margins. There are 3 Republicans who have expressed an interest in hearing from witnesses, but that crucial 4th vote that Democrats would need has yet to emerge.
The senator from Alaska.
I sent a question to the desk.
Thank you.
The first of 2 days of Q&A lasted more than 9 hours.
And there was no quid pro quo.
And included this novel argument from Alan Dershowitz.
If a president does something which he believes will help him get elected in the public interest, that cannot be the kind of quid pro quo that results in impeachment.
Democrats called that an extraordinary claim.
I hope that my Republican colleagues understand the precedent that's being set here.
All night long, there was one topic they kept coming back to.
John R. Bolton's forthcoming book and the testimony of Bolton.
The defense team warned that if senators subpoena Bolton, they'll have their own requests.
I want Adam Schiff. I want Hunter Biden. I want Joe Biden. I want the whistleblower. I get anybody we want. By the way, if we get anybody we want, we will be here for a very long time.
The impeachment managers called that a threat.
We will make you pay for it with endless delay. The Senate will never be able to go back to its business. That's their argument.
But the argument seems to be working with Republicans.
I don't see a need for any additional witnesses. America has heard enough.
Another looming question, will any of the red state Democrats vote to acquit the president?
Does getting witnesses affect your final decision?
It could very well. I think it's a real problem when the president starts attacking every witness that is proposed to come here. I think that's a real problem. And quite frankly, some people would argue that it shows his guilt under Article 2.
So, Nancy, we've been focusing a lot on the Republicans, but how united are Democrats and the 2 independent senators when it comes to voting in favor of witnesses?
We have not seen any cracks in that allegiance among Democratic senators to vote in favor of witnesses, Anne-Marie. Even those 3 Democratic senators who could, in the end, vote to acquit this president, they come from red states. They're under a lot of pressure to do that. Even they say that they favor hearing from witnesses. You just heard from Doug Jones of Alabama. He said that he actually finds it very suspect that the president keeps trying to block these witnesses, and he thinks it might be an indication of the president's guilt. Joe Manchin, another one of those red state Democrats from West Virginia, he has been very vocal about the fact that he needs to hear from witnesses, particularly John Bolton. He has even signaled he might be open to hearing from Joe Biden. And then Kyrsten Sinema, the 3rd Democratic senator in that trio from Arizona, she's been a lot quieter, more difficult to read, but we do know that at the start of this trial, she did vote in favor of hearing from witnesses. So we are assuming at this point that that's where she would still land.
All right, so I have to ask you about Alan Dershowitz's argument. And I wish we had time to play sort of the whole thing, what he considers something that's not good behavior versus what he described as decent behavior. But he basically says, hey, if you're the president and you think you're such a great president that it would be in the best interest of the public and of the country for you to be reelected, and you do something in the best interest of the public, that's not impeachable. So it's not surprising that, Democrats, as you mentioned in your story, thought that was a load of hooey, as you might say. But what about Republicans? How are they responding to that argument?
they're essentially turning a deaf ear to it, Anne-Marie, and embracing some of the other arguments that Alan Dershowitz made that they find more compelling. I mean, look, if you take that argument to its logical conclusion, then you could have argued back in the 1970s that it was just fine for President Nixon to have people break into the DNC at the Watergate because he felt that it would be helpful for his reelection, and he thought his reelection would be good for the country. So no harm, no foul. So that is one problem with that argument. The other problem is that Dershowitz is saying a quid pro quo is okay if it's in the interest of the president's reelection. Well, the problem is that the rest of the president's defense team has been arguing that there was no quid pro quo. So there is some tension there between his argument and the argument that the rest of the defense is making, and that's why Republican senators have more or less stayed silent on the entire controversy.
So after today wraps up, we're expecting the next move to be this vote on witnesses. That's what many of us are talking about, but there will also be other votes or motions as well. And, you know, the other thing is it's not just witnesses, but it's additional evidence and perhaps even evidence that has already, in a way, been submitted in the opening statements, the actual perhaps interviews, I don't know. Brad brought up a really interesting concept yesterday. He asked whether or not John Bolton's notes could be subpoenaed if the book was not permitted to be entered in as evidence. So, you know, I guess so there's a lot of stuff going on. In terms of a final vote on whether the president would be removed from office, when could that happen?
It could theoretically happen as soon as late tomorrow, because if the Senate votes against hearing from new witnesses, and keep in mind this could be a 50-50 vote, 50 yeas, 50 nays, which would force the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, John Roberts, to decide whether he wants to be the tie-breaking vote. How wild would that be? If that goes down, however, then you move to a series of motions that Democrats could introduce, which could drag things out. It's a little unclear to everybody how exactly that would go. We do know that the Republican leader has some power to shut that down, and then theoretically, they would move to a final vote on removal or acquittal, and that could potentially come either late Friday or even Saturday.
Wow. Okay. It's going to be a busy few days. Nancy Cordes, thank you very much.
You're welcome.